Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 17, Verse 12. Ko vrishchatava padam strin Sorabheya chatuspada Mabhuvam stvadrisa rastre Ragyam Krishna nuvartanam. Translation: He, Maharaj Parikshit, repeatedly addressed and questioned the bull thus: O son of Surabhi, who has cut off your 3 legs? In the state of the kings who were obedient to the laws of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, there is no one as unhappy as you are. Purport: the kings or executive heads of all states must know the codes of Lord Krishna, generally Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, and must act accordingly in order to fulfill the mission of human life, which is to make an end of all miseries of material conditions. One who knows the codes of Lord Krishna can achieve this end without any difficulty. In the Bhagavad Gita, in a synopsis, we can understand the codes of Godhead, and in the Srimad Bhagavatam, the same codes are explained further. In a state where the codes of Krishna are followed, no one is unhappy. When such codes are not followed, the first sign is that 3 legs of the representative of religion are cut off, and thereby all miseries follow. When Krishna was personally present, the codes of Krishna were being followed without question, but in his absence such codes are presented in the pages of Srimad Bhagavatam for the guidance of the blind persons who happen to be at the helm of all affairs. Translation: He, Maharaj Parikshit, repeatedly addressed and questioned the bull thus: O son of Surabhi, who has cut off your 3 legs? In the state of the kings who were obedient to the laws of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, there is no one as unhappy as you. So, here Parikshit Maharaj indicates that the king is in control, and under his control there should be no violence, as we see here with the personification of Kali cutting off and beating the legs of the bull. And it is additionally stated here that the king is obedient to Krishna. Krishna anuvartanam, which literally means they following Krishna. The kings follow Krishna. And in such a state, this condition can never occur. So repeatedly we see here in these different purports, Prabhupada is emphasizing the nature of the heads of state, whether they're kings or presidents or whatever. They have a certain duty to perform. And that's, of course, natural to this topic here, because Parikshit is the king, and Kali is trying to intrude into his kingdom and destroy it by sinful activities. So the responsibility lies with the leader, whether he's king or any other type of leader. And the whole question, of course, is what is the nature of that leader? And what is he supposed to institute so that the state can run properly? So here it is stated, Krishna anuvartanam. These kings, they follow after Krishna. They're following him. So we see that there is 2 aspects of this. One is the general aspect, and that the kings are following the principles enunciated in the Vedic scriptures. And particularly, of course, we have the smritis, such as Manu Smriti, and there it gives all the different rules for governance and all the rules for sinful activity, pious activity. Everything is defined very nicely, and everybody has their duty be performed under the king. So that's one level. It's following Krishna in the sense that ultimately Krishna's Supreme Personality of Godhead, and then under him we have so many rules to be followed, instituted by or produced by different personalities like Manu, etc. So Manu is the authorized line of kings, and then he's produced Manu Smriti, and he is empowered by the Supreme Lord. Of course, not directly, but indirectly through Vishnu forms. But ultimately, it goes back to Krishna. So, though it's a little bit indirect, it's not directly Krishna, it is through instituting the Smritis and whatnot. It's scripture, approved scripture, so ultimately it's coming from the Supreme Lord. But we also know that that has to be, that system has to be related somehow to the Supreme Lord, and we can emphasize that by just saying it has to have Krishna somewhere within that system. So as I mentioned previously, you can have a Varnashram system that looks like it's Vedic, but if there's no Supreme Lord there, then it's useless. It's called Asurak Varnashram. So you can try to imitate the whole system, but if you don't have that system directed towards the Supreme Lord, then it is useless. So it has to include the Supreme Lord. So it can be, let's say, in one sense, theistic, something theistic woven into that system, and that's fine. But we also have to understand that in the Bhagavatam, the whole point is not so much instituting a Varnashram system as getting everybody to worship Krishna. So this is also a direct order for the people of Kali Yuga, wherever and whoever they are, to worship Krishna. So in that sense, everybody should be Krishna Anuvarta. They should be following Krishna, whether they're the citizens or the king. So in other words, everybody should be Krishna conscious, including the king. So as well as instituting some sort of varnashramic system, the kings should also have recognition of Krishna and understand that it's ultimately leading back to him. In other words, they should be devotees of the Supreme Lord. So originally, of course, the kings were all coming from Manu, and Manu was empowered by the Lord. So they were devotees of the Lord of some sort, that is Vishnu, but not particularly Krishna, because it's only in Dwapara Yuga that Krishna appears. And so it's only now that we can actually hope that people can be knowledgeable of Krishna. So therefore we can have a system. We also have to have respect for the Supreme Lord, and ultimately we also have to have respect for, in Kali Yuga, our particular Kali Yuga, we have to respect Krishna. We have to give him the topmost respect. Prabhupada uses this word Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. So of course all of the forms of God are wonderful, and in one sense all supreme because they're non-different. But we also know that Krishna is very special. So of all the personalities of Godhead, we have the supreme form, and that is Krishna. And it's already made clear in the Bhagavatam, after listing all the different avatars of the Lord, including Ramchandra and Nrsimhadev and Vamana and Varaha and Hayagriva, that ultimately Krishna is still Bhagavan Swayam. That ultimately is the theme of the whole Bhagavatam, and everything has to cooperate with that. So everything has to be centered on Krishna, not any form of the Lord, but ultimately on Krishna. And therefore the whole 10th canto is dedicated to glorifying Krishna by describing his pastimes. It's good to have a good political system that follows the varnashramic model, but there has to be Krishna there somewhere in that system. Leaders have to be Krishna conscious. They have to be aware of that supreme personality of Godhead. Then it becomes proper. Of course, the compensation is that even if we can't do anything in terms of altering the social system, still, what is the solution? And the solution, as I mentioned before, is with a political system or without a political system in any country, at any time, in any language or wherever, one can become successful spiritually by worshiping Krishna. So it goes beyond all conditions of the material world. Of course, it's preferable that a whole country is running properly. But if that cannot happen, at least the individuals can become successful by becoming Krishna conscious. Not just Vishnu conscious or whatever, but Krishna conscious, because he's that highest form. So this is the whole theme of the Bhagavatam. Ultimately, Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam. Whatever you do, you worship Krishna. And we have different forms of worship, different engagements of worship. But of all those forms of worship, again, emphasis is upon Nam Sankirtan, chanting the name of Krishna. And it's repeated throughout the Bhagavatam, and at the conclusion of the Bhagavatam. The only good quality in Kali Yuga is Krishna Sankirtan, to chant the name of Krishna. Even if the political system is not proper, still, individuals can be successful by becoming Krishna conscious and chanting the name of Krishna. So that's become the mission of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, somehow or other, in any condition of life, that you chant the name of Krishna. And this will bring about success for yourself and all the people around you. Yeah? So if individuals are successful in their spiritual life, hopefully they can influence others, and in this way, gradually, at least we get some of the people, group of people, Krishna conscious. Lord Chaitanya, of course, is more ambitious than that, and he says, in every town and village my name will be chanted. So he's hoping for spreading Krishna consciousness all around the world, everywhere. And of course, to some extent, that's been successful. But we have to work at it more and more all the time. That consciousness, of course, we can't expect the highest levels on everybody. Everybody cannot reach the same levels. Even in a varnashramic society, people are on different levels, and they're only expected to follow certain amounts of rules on different levels, and not everybody can follow everything. So similarly, for becoming Krishna conscious, then we have different levels as well, and we cannot expect, of course it's nice that everybody's at the highest level, but realistically speaking, people are going to be at different levels, and it may take them many lifetimes to get to the next level. So we just have to do our best to distribute the name and the message of Krishna to everyone, and some will accept to little degrees, some more degrees, and some completely. And this way we can at least give everybody some contact with the process of bhakti and chanting the holy name. So the more we do that, of course, the more people contact and more people can become favorable to it. And out of those, then some will become very serious about it. But we should never be discouraged, because there's always some effect that we don't see. Last night I was explaining that, quoting from the Nectar Devotion there in the southern section there, it said that generally just to get you an inclination for Krishna in a certain direction, or even for Krishna, to worship Krishna rather than any other form of the Lord, or to have a favorability for a certain rasa for Krishna, it takes several lifetimes to develop to that degree where you can actually accept Krishna and then become attracted to a certain rasa. It's going to take several lifetimes just to get that far. What to speak of what happens before then? So for many people it's going to be a very, very gradual process. So that's why I said we don't expect everybody to reach the highest level very quickly. Of course, those who have already progressed in previous lifetimes, then they will definitely progress very quickly in this lifetime because they've already done something. So, and others, maybe they're just beginning. So, all sorts of people get affected, but some of that we're not going to see. It's going to take many lifetimes in the future for them to develop. But the benefit is always there for everyone. So, therefore, whether the effects are visible or invisible, nevertheless, the effects are there. The power of Krishna's name is there for everyone. So that actually is the hope for Kali Yuga. It is not just the Yuga Dharma of chanting the name, but it's actually chanting Krishna's name. That's the blessing for our particular Yuga. So, therefore, that is the how we can produce this Krishna Anuvartanam, have everybody following Krishna or becoming obedient to Krishna by spreading the Sankirtan movement. So if we can do that very nicely, good. So this verse here, is a description of the three legs, the four-legged bull and the three legs cut off. Kali was beating the legs of the bull. Now actually we see the legs are cut off, which indicates that 3/4 of Dharma are finished and 1/4 is left. And even that, of course, is not so healthy state also because he's pounding at the last leg. Which means, in terms of Dharma, that the principles which encourage us to avoid sinful activities and to do the opposite are declining. And sinful activities are ultimately violence. Of course, the Vedic literature see many different things are sin, that's a sin, this is sin. Some are sin simply by not doing the punya aspect, then it's considered a sin if you don't do it, whatever. But the real sins are the sins of violence. And we know that by violence we get karma. By karma, of course, then we suffer. So if we have a society where there is 3 parts violence out of 4, 3/4 of it is violent society, they have to suffer in this life and next life. It is inevitable according to the law of karma that will happen. So somehow or other, this is the nature of Kali Yuga, more sinful activity, more violent activity, and we get the suffering as a result of that. So nobody likes that suffering, but as we see, it is difficult unless we have higher knowledge to rectify that situation. And Prabhupada has mentioned that we don't like wars, we don't like conflict, we don't like violence, we don't like suffering. After the First World War, they made a League of Nations. But in spite of that, then they had another war. Then they made another thing called the United Nations. But then again, it's not preventing war at all. They keep going on, one after the other. There's a continuously war in the world, and that United Nations cannot in any way stop it for some reason. So people are helpless. They may have good sentiments that we don't like war, but they don't know how to solve that problem. They cannot solve the violence. So I think downstairs in the Krishna village, there's a quote. Who was it from? Is it Tolstoy or whatever? If you commit violence against the animals, then naturally, we're going to have wars or like that. So that's a Western observation of an author. So it's true. Yeah. And that's what's pointed out here, that as long as you got the prominence of sinful activity, which is ultimately violence, then you're going to have proliferation of violence in human society itself on different levels. It can be not just world wars or local wars. Within the country itself, you'll have struggles, class struggles, etc. Or within the family, you'll have all sorts of problems, domestic violence, this violence, that violence, or whatever. All levels, you're going to have these problems. So, but nobody likes it, but very difficult for people to solve the problem, unless we get higher knowledge. So one level, of course, is the dharmic level. Understand what is dharma, what is adharma, enforce laws. So if we can protect the animals at least, and not do violence to animals, then we can bring some stability to society. So that's what Prabhupada emphasizes in most of these verses in his purport, in spite of the fact that actually this is only symbolic of dharma itself, but nevertheless there's a cow and a bull getting attacked. So he concentrates on the violence done to animals, because dharma in one sense it's not just animal but all violence. So the aspect of dharma is to prevent violence on all levels, and one is the animal level. So animal level and then human level and then plant level, whatever, we have all these levels of violence. So it has to be minimized. So that's one way in which it can be done. But then how do we do that? How do we make people refrain from killing animals and eating meat and doing all of these things? So Bhagavad Gita gives an interesting solution. If you get a higher taste, you give up the lower taste. So ultimately, in the Bhagavad Gita, that means if you have a taste for the spiritual Atma and Lord, then you can give up this lust in the material world. If you don't do that, then you're going to get stuck and you're back in the material world trying to enjoy again. And again, there's violence and there's a problem. So the solution to our problem, therefore, is not a political solution, it's a spiritual solution. We've got to introduce that spiritual taste into society. And if it's possible, then very good. Even that is difficult in most cases, but Bhagavatam is giving the solution to that also, how to introduce spiritual taste for everybody. And then it's Nam Sankirtan. Give people a taste for that at least. Even if they don't know what it is. Get a little taste for it at least. And then they'll gradually begin to change a little bit and they develop some spiritual interest or whatnot by their agata sukriti. And this is the solution to all that violence in the material world. Of course, it may be a gradual process, but also it's we can never underestimate the power of the name. And that's why we have so many stories in the Bhagavatam, like the story of Ajamil, to show the extraordinary powers of the holy name, even if it is uttered accidentally. It can save you from Yamaraj, can destroy all your karmas or whatever. So there are extraordinary effects from chanting the holy name, and we should never underestimate it. So it's in all situations, the name is the solution to everything. So when it says here, Krishna Anuvarshanam, following after Krishna, ultimately we should say that everybody should chant the holy name of Krishna. That's how they can follow Krishna. If they can't do that, let them at least hear it. So from the top down, from the leaders down to all the other people, get them exposed to hearing the name of Krishna. And this is the solution in Kali Yuga. From that, then, we can hope for better leaders, better government, and then overall prosperity for the society. Okay, any question there? Here it says, guidance of blind people who happen to be at the helm of all affairs. Blind. That's the present situation.
In the prayer report, also we regularly refer to Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Is that a term that Prabhupada invented, or is it based on a Sanskrit term? Or?
It's from Bhagavan. This is translation of Bhagavan, Swayam Bhagavan. So actually, we always use that term, Supreme Personality of God, but I don't think we even think about what it means. But obviously the personality is there because we don't want a Mayavad interpretation, interpersonal interpretation that God has no form and no quality, so it's personality. Of course, the other aspect of personality is not just he's a person, but he's full of wonderful, wonderful qualities. You know, he's a great personality, a great person of character, or whatever. And then among those, then he is God, but even then he's supreme. So he is the supreme form of God, which indicates Swayam Bhagavan, Krishna. Yeah.
And also, the understanding is that when we achieve a certain level, we're eligible for liberation, but we don't go straight back to God. We go back to like a planet where Krishna is performing his pastimes. So presumably the level we achieve to get to that planet is not as high as going back to Godhead directly.
Oh, well, that's one option. I think in several places this is one opinion that you go to another universe. There's one advantage there, even if you're not 100% perfect, then if you're almost perfect, then you can go in there and participate. Like some of the gopis were not Siddha yet. They were getting close to that, but not quite pure. But by that separation, then they burned up then they attained their spiritual bodies. So they're almost there, and then they got into it. So therefore, persons on a very high level that are not quite qualified for the spiritual world, they can go into those pastimes and get whatever, purify themselves and end up with Krishna through association with the Nityasiddhas, whatever.
So the gopis who are with Krishna and the Rasa Leela, we hear that, or as far as I understand, they're originally the saviors of Dandakaranya, who desired a conjugal relationship. They took, like with Lord Ram, so they took birth.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But I think I've read that they were expansions of Lakshmi.
Oh, I don't know, but then they wouldn't be. They would already be Siddha. Well, there's two groups. There's the sages of Dandakaranya, and then there is the personified Vedas. So there's two groups of sadhana siddhas that entered into the pastimes there. Yeah, which if they're going to enter in, they have to be perfect. But since they're sadhana siddhas, then they would be jivas working their way out of the material world. Yeah. But that doesn't mean they're all like that. There could be others as well. And plus there's the Nityasiddhas there also at the same time in the pastimes, because there were 3 billion gopis in the Rasa Leela, so an awful lot of people there.
So the 16,000 wives who were captured, I forget his name, but they all, Krishna accepted them as their wives and they were living in Dwarka. They were expansions of Lakshmi, or they were jivas? Oh,
it's not mentioned, but Vishwanath mentions in one place that if you worship Krishna in Madhurya Rasa in the Aishvarya mood, then you could become a queen in Dwarka. So then I would imagine that some of them would be sadhana siddhas.
Right. So basically, so many different categories.
Yeah.
Maharaj, you mentioned Manu earlier in the talk. It seems like this Vash is significant to the Krishna deity, or Ram deity, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. You know, apparently he's moving from this planet. But someone like Manu, why doesn't Manu come and, like he's got his rules for mankind, why doesn't he come and propound them?
What is his? He establishes dharma, like we have the Manu Smriti. So it's basically varnashram rules are implemented.
So what does the Manu himself visit this part of the universe, who's in charge of mankind?
What is it?
Manu.
Yeah.
Why doesn't he personally come to this Vash himself? And
Why does he come?
why doesn't he come? Why doesn't he
Now?
come? Yeah.
Well, he establishes a rule, and then for 71 yuga cycles, his descendants rule. Just like we have Swayambhuva Manu, then his sons came there, and finally we get Priyavrata, and we have Dhruva. Those are the descendants from that Manu. Eventually we get down to King Vena. Then he was in the same line, and then they killed him, and they put Prithu on the line, and that continued for 71 yuga cycles. And then everything changes, all the devatas and the Manus changed, and then we get another Manu coming up, and now we're in the Vajrasvata Manvantara, and then he's established his reign, and it's come down, and that's traced in then like the ninth canto there, the whole descendant, and then came up to the Pandavas in the line, and then down to Parikshit, and then he had a few descendants, and then that was the end of it, and then the last descendants ran up to the Himalayas, so then we're stuck.
Just wondering about whether or not the Vedic scriptures had anything to say about democracy.
Oh.
And whether or not that's just a symptom of Kali Yuga.
Yeah, the systems we find in ancient India and the Vedas were monarchical kings. And as we say, the kings were descended from certain lines who were empowered by the Supreme Lord, because of Manu. And they go on for, millions and millions of years, these lines, and one after the other, for 71 yuga cycles, times 4 million, that's one. And throughout the day of Brahma, we have these lines of kings going on. So it's a hereditary line, more or less, of kings that rule. And they got some empowerment by the Supreme Lord so they can maintain principles properly. The problem with that is that we see, not only in India, but around the world, they usually had monarchies of some sort in ancient times, but then people got a little frustrated because some of the monarchs weren't very good, and the whole, it was exploitative, more or less, and then we had a lot of slaves and things like that, and they were all suppressed, so then they revolted and they kicked out the kings, and eventually we ended up with what we call the democratic system, where the common people choose and rule. So it's good in one sense, because then we don't have one exploiter, but the problem is that the people don't know who to elect, and they can get fooled, as often happens. They get fooled into electing certain people who promise things, but they don't give. They give something else instead of what they promise. Or they do such a thing that the people still think they're living nicely, but actually they're not. They're getting exploited more than ever. So we still end up with exploitation taking place. So that's the problem in a democracy. The good point, of course, is if you get frustrated enough, you can unelect them, put somebody else in power. But then again, you can get fooled again, and somebody else can do the same thing to you. So
how would one gain faith in the political system when we seem to keep moving from one to the next, from feudalism to fascism, communism, etc.?
Yeah, all sorts of political. They experiment. They try experimenting after they got rid of the kings, the monarchical system. They've experimented with various systems, none of which have really succeeded. Like communism kind of failed out. Also, theoretically, it looked nice, but it didn't work properly because the people weren't pure enough to institute it properly, and it became state heavy again. It was again, power from the top down. Yeah? And then, so the opposite is power from the bottom up. But then even then you can trick the people. You can fool the people, so this becomes a problem also. So of course we can have pluses and minuses on both sides now, whether to just trust the monarch or not, and that doesn't seem to work either, because the people who get in power as monarchs are pretty not qualified either. And then the other one is that you trust from the bottom up, but that seems to have a lot of problems also. And sometimes we can't even, the people you have to choose from, you don't want to choose either of them. They're both bad, so what do you do?
I thought that the report Prabhupada mentions in relation to this question that the sign of a good leader is that no one is unhappy.
Yeah.
So it's interesting because nowadays they still try that to make everyone happy.
Yeah.
But they give them beer, television, football, soccer matches.
Yeah.
And
The idea of happiness is wrong. That's because they don't have that spiritual vision from the top. They have a lower vision. So make people happy by giving them all the bad things.
I think more, whether it's democracy or monarchy, is not really the issue. The issue is that both, they try the same thing and they try to make people happy. Because that's what Bhagavatam said before, right? He says no one should be unhappy because it's the sign of a good relationship.
Yeah.
But instead of doing it globally, spiritual things or understanding of the body, they do it with television, so match whatever, beer.
And then if you have the communist system, then the reason they didn't like it is because they couldn't get the sense gratification that was available in the West. And that's called freedom, but actually, and happiness, but actually it's not. So, our concept of happiness is completely wrong, and you can expect that from majority of people, as in the Varnashram system also. They don't expect that either. So they say, okay, we'll provide all that. We'll give you what you need, but there's limitation also. So limitation is, greater in that system than our present democratic system, but they also have the higher level. There's something more than that, but unfortunately that's what they don't have in our present world. You just got, okay, happiness means to get your, intoxications and this and that. So. No higher vision, no higher taste.
In relation to, you said that all the kings are descendants of Manu, but I thought also the whole humanity, all human beings are also descendants of Manu. Is there a difference, or?
Well, yeah, the Manus establish a genealogical line of kings. Their son comes to power, and Swayambhu, but then he has sons. His sons become the next ruler. Then their sons become the next ruler. Now, of course, the Manu produced all of the progenies, etc. That was, we can say, separate, but he had his own personal family members that became the heads of state as well.
So basically, you're saying he had one line which goes to just kings.
Yeah, and then all the progeny or whatever, for the world or whatever. Yeah.
So we have the same genes, basically. We all come from the same.
Yeah. We say all the people originate from there as well. Yeah. But I don't know whether it happens in the next Manu, whether it happens because already the population is there. So once the second Manu or third Manu comes, then they don't have to repopulate necessarily unless they all disappear or something.
Because I was reading in the Bhagavatam that all humankind is descended of Manu and Satyarupa, isn't it?
Yeah.
So is that
like Adam and Eve?
Oh, they're the same?
They're similar.
So is that the same Manu that gives this line of kings?
Who's?
The same Manu, Swayambhu Manu.
Yeah.
Is that the same Manu that gives these kings?
Yeah. But then it happens every 71 yuga cycle. A new Manu comes in, and then he establishes a new line. So now we're in the 7th one in the day of Brahma, Vaivasata Manu. And then we're in the 28th cycle now, out of 71 yuga cycles. So we're in the 28th cycle in the Kali Yuga now. Okay, Hare Krishna.